at you. You look so pretty.
Aw, so do you.
Oh, thanks.
Oh my gosh, how are you? It's
I'm
so
good.
crazy that I can't even remember the last time we actually did this.
I know it's been a
Like,
while. So this episode is really just about social media and um, really more surrounding the partnerships that, what are things to look for? What are big red flags to look for when you're making online partnerships? Because in the arts world, like we're both dancers. We're both in the big art scene in, LA area, New York area, like that sort of a thing. And so working with people and connecting and collabing and things like that it's just a big part of that scene. And, the dance scene, I think, especially too, because when you're a dancer, you're not just connecting with other dancers, you're connecting with photographers and musicians and companies. And especially when you're freelance, like if you're not a freelance, I feel like it probably doesn't come as much, you have a lot more people vetted, but when you're a freelance, you have to vet everybody yourself,
right.
which is, kind of hard. So I thought we could get into a really good discussion of that. But first, introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about you.
Hi, my name is Adele. I am from Los Angeles, but I currently go to school at Barnard College of Columbia University, and I'm double majoring in dance and psychology. Um, I am currently a junior, and I'm 21 years old.
Oh, yes, we have that 6-month gap where we're both the same age.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy, right?
I always forget about that. Yeah, so me and Adele have known each other for, I think I did the math. I think we're coming up on 7 or 8 years. And we met at a summer intensive in Los Angeles at a home studio I started going to, a place that became my home studio for a while. And we ended up meeting there, and then we never got rid of each other. We constantly kept talking. We became really good friends, and like every friendship has had our ups and downs, and and we've continued to stay the course through our adult lives, and so that's been really special. So but we've both been part of the scene of there's actually, so the reason why we ended up doing this podcast is because there was a situation, and we usually on social media, we both have each other's backs. Like there's like, we run with the same crowd. I mean, the world is really small. There's a lot of people in the world, but for every 2 people you meet, chances are they know 1 or 2 people in your circle of people that you have run with or, connected with. And so we were, I was running into a little bit of a problem, and, she noticed something on my social media. And so we were talking about, we've always run into this thing about being two girls and, both being of Asian descent. And we've gone through a lot of things in the arts world that has been just like kind of wild. And so I think we wanted to kind of bring up, what are some red flags that we can look for when we're making partnerships. I think especially more for women or girls, because we're both very young at the same time. But especially when you're a young freelance in a big city of that sort of a thing, how the real topic of conversation is, how do you look for those red flags and how do you steer clear of them? And so what are your thoughts on that? Because we've had a little bit of a chance to talk about it, but not much. So
yeah. Well, so I'm always open to collaborating with other artists, and whether they're, musicians or they're other dancers or even like visual artists or and like photographers. But one thing, especially with me being a young person moving to a big city and like being on my own, and I grew up with not overprotective parents, but parents, who always looked out for me, and I was pretty sheltered. But then once I moved to a big city, I kind of had to figure out how to take care of myself. And there was one instance, I remember I was 18, almost 19, where I was working with a photographer, and he seemed pretty normal on the surface. He approached me on Instagram and said, hey, I checked out your profile. You have, you know, a really great look, and I'm wondering if you would want to collaborate and add to each other's portfolios. And I, not really having so much modeling experience or working with photographers, I did not ask for enough details beforehand, which I should have, such as, you know, is this paid? And what is going to be the format of the shoot? Like, what kinds of photos? And, you know, he said, oh, like, we can have a phone call before, we can meet up in a coffee shop, like, to talk about all these details. And we did have a phone call, and he like made me feel very comfortable, and we came up with ideas and stuff. But when I asked for an example of his work, he did not have a website, first of all. He told me, I actually don't advertise any of my work because of the client's privacy, which I bought that story. And looking back, I could not believe that I bought it. You know, how naive I could be to think that, oh, for the client's privacy, I'm not going to share my work. No, like, if you want your name out there, you would have a website, or at least you would have some evidence on even your Instagram profile that you've got something to show for your work. On his Instagram, he did not have anything. He had personal photos, you know, with his dog and like with his friends, nothing that showed more professional like photography work. And then I also noticed that the photos that he did send me about things that inspired him, or his mood board, were of very scantily clad women, very little clothing, like in very sexual poses. And he said, no, but like, I don't use that for like any like, you know, weird purposes. It's because I think like the nude body is so like beautiful and artistic, and like we can play around with that. And I said, sure, you know, I'm comfortable with that. Like, so the day of the shoot, I go alone to his apartment in New York. He had a little thing set up, you know, he had like a blank like white wall, and he had like stuff, equipment, and like he had a camera, and we did some shots. And actually we did some clothes, but most of it was either I was partially nude or I was down to my underwear. Nothing that he did was coerced or where I felt that I was in a position of discomfort or not being able to give consent. But after the shoot, he said, I will look at these photos, I'll edit them, I'll get them back to you in a couple of weeks, in a couple of days, actually. So I waited and I waited and I waited, and nothing came back. None of the photos. And this was 2 years ago. And so, no, actually almost 3 years ago.
3 years ago?
Yeah. And still, I have no idea
where the photos
are. And I couldn't believe, and I texted him like, hey, don't want to push, but do you know where the editing process is? Like, any photos that you could send me, like raw images or anything really. And he kept saying things like, I'm sorry, I'm just really busy, I'll get them to you. I know you want to post these on your Instagram, you want them for your portfolio, I'll get them to you. Nothing. A month, 2 months, 3 months, nothing ever came back. And the basically what I'm saying is that I don't really like the idea of guy with camera, you know, the kind of guy who he's got a camera and he's got all this fancy equipment and he really plays himself up, like, you know, in my home studio I've got a lot of, you know, equipment, it's like, it's going to be safe, like we'll play around with a bunch of ideas, like we'll work with what ideas you have and stuff. But he really doesn't have any experience with the camera, like with taking actual like photography classes. He doesn't really have a passion for it. He's more posing as the guy with the camera in order to, as an excuse to get close with young women, like young attractive women, and sort of get themselves off in a sexual way. And who knows what they're doing with those photos, you know? So that's my story, a story that, unfortunately, it's something I have to go through as a young person, and I don't want that happening to anyone else our age or at any age.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I don't know if you want me to, if you and I can discuss maybe like the red flags or the things to look out for.
I mean, I think any time that, so I've worked with a lot of photographers too, and I'm not like, anytime a photographer, because for me, I'm not interested in like nude shoots, which is just me. That's just who I am. That's not something I'm comfortable with. Mm-hmm. But anytime a guy ever says like, that's something I want to do, I normally automatically veer away from that, because I know that even in photography classes or art classes or things like that, just from like what I hear, like, that are of people that are in like art majors and they're doing, nude art or whatever the case may be, it's always sexualized. And so it's like, okay, like what, like those types of things. And I mean, you have to kind of look at it too, is like, especially with nude shoots, like I always like kind of question, like, even the girls in the magazines or these celebrities that are doing it, like there is a level of some like there's a level of people know in their heads that if there's going to be a nude shoot, they're already putting themselves out there to potentially be sexualized, because that's just how the world is right now. And so it's like, if that's not something that you yourself are comfortable with being sexualized, or your friend looking at your nude photo and being like, oh, wow, she's really hot. And then it changes the whole dynamic of that friendship. Like, yeah. I've even thought about it in those types of ways. Mm-hmm. But like, even on the grander scale, like, I think it's interesting because you mentioned like the whole school thing, like not being educated and things like that. I think that's a big thing too, is like, not having a portfolio. One, like I think whether or not it's a website, it has to be something. You have to see something. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to kind of it's like kind of based on intuition too, I feel like. Yeah. I like, there's some guys that give you a really weird vibe, and there's like, I don't know your intentions, I don't quite trust your intentions. Mm-hmm. And then there are some where, like, I have a photographer friend that that I work with actually a lot now. And he was somebody that I met mutually through a different friend, and she has done shoots with him and things like that. And I think in the artistic world too, it's kind of weird because people that are not in that industry are like, those are weird people. Yeah. Because of the appreciation, especially with dance photography or modeling. The photographers do have an appreciation for the body. They mm-hmm. do have an appreciation for certain aesthetic looking type things. But I think the big thing is, if there's ever a photographer that doesn't have a portfolio, that's definitely one big red flag. And then the second one being, if they ever give you pushback on bringing somebody with you, that's something that like, I'm going to be like, I might bring a friend. Whether or not I'm going to bring that person is totally up to me. But if mm-hmm. I say I might bring a friend, or I might bring a family member or something like that, mm-hmm. and they give me pushback, I don't work with them because that means that their intentions are not as pure as they say. Yes. And if they're secure enough in their own gift, then they won't have a problem with it. Exactly. If they are comfortable with their own, they're comfortable doing photography or anything like that, they'll be mm-hmm. comfortable with that, right. And, right. And I think there's some photographers that do get offended because they're like, oh, you don't think my intentions are pure, but that's also a prideful way to look at it. Like, that person wants to feel safe around you. So it's like, what's the issue? And
exactly. Yeah, that's true with this photographer that I just talked about. Yeah, he did. I remember saying to him, like, I'm probably going to bring a guy friend, and he said something like, oh, I just, in a tiny New York City apartment, it's not really a lot of room, like, for another person there. And also I don't want that other person to interfere with like our vibe and like our energy. Like when we work together, like you probably won't feel comfortable doing some things in front of this guy friend of yours, versus if you weren't here and it was just you and me. Yeah. And
versus a perfect stranger.
And it also makes me feel like it seems like you don't trust me, so we can always push the photo shoot date to another day, and like, we can have another conversation beforehand so you feel more comfortable. Yeah. No, I definitely think that pushback was like the way that also he phrased these things, and like to make it feel like, oh, you won't feel comfortable doing this, like you want, like,
it's a bit gaslighty, isn't it?
I know, it's subtle manipulation. It's very psychologically just like, it's messed up, you know. Yeah, but yes, as like pushback of any kind of bringing somebody else to keep you safe, it's your choice, and like, you know, it's always, you should always have a choice, to, and like a person who respects you will be like, okay, bring a friend with you, you know, and have no issue with it. So yeah, that's another big one, a big red flag.
Yeah. I think I think it goes across the board with like all different kinds of things. Cause like being a dancer, I was a freelance at one point and things like that. So doing shoots with photographers, I didn't always mesh with the photographers I worked with, but I always had somebody with me. So I remember there was a shoot that I was shooting with one of my friends, and I trusted him, and he had a photographer friend. And me and the photographer didn't really mesh well, but I felt comfortable enough because my friend was there. And if my friend wasn't there, I would have left the shoot, because I was like, I don't like this guy. This is not my thing. But I think too, the other thing is like for young people or even parents that are kind of listening to this, to kind of figure out, okay, like what are some signs, especially if your kid is going to go into the arts world? Like it's an eat doggy world. Like it's really bad. And I think the big thing, especially for women, is to be really careful that you're not being taken advantage of in a lot of different ways. And so it's like, or being manipulative. Like you have to, it's almost like, it sounds really bad, but in any type of collaboration that I go into where I don't really know the person too well, I'm expecting them and I'm waiting for them to kind of manipulate me to see. So it's being very aware of like, what are they doing? Like, I think any guy that starts pointing toward a direction of talking to you every day, or wanting to collaborate with you all the time, or pointing it more in like a, let's go do this, and it's a little bit romantic in a sense, like not necessarily that there's romance in it, but that kind of vibe where it's like, I think this person is like kind of likes me, or kind of is asking me on a date, like, oh, like you're gorgeous, you're stunning, like this. My photographer friend does not say that. He says, oh, these shots are really good. Like he doesn't say, wow, you look stunning, you look gorgeous, and all those types of things. And I am in a relationship. So if I bring my boyfriend to a set, you know, I'm sure that's a little bit intimidating as it is. But even when my boyfriend wasn't on the set for that shoot, he didn't say that at all. And he didn't know that I was in a relationship at that point. So sometimes I kind of keep that hidden too, is like, I'm in a relationship. I keep that hidden to see what their character is going to be like.
Right.
And
you test them.
Yeah.
You got to pass, they have to pass that. Like, you know, like it's, like honestly, sometimes, so that brings up something that I wanted to say too, right along the same lines as you, which is the photographer that you're working with should never make you feel sexualized or like uncomfortable. Like if they ever start saying anything about your physical appearance, like in a sexual way, or in a way that's like, is this person hitting on me? Like, what did he just say? Like anything like, oh, you're gorgeous, you have a hot body. Or
because that's not professional.
It's not professional, first of all. And second, how do you know that the woman or the person you're working with is comfortable with you saying those things about their appearance? And like, you know, so like if you're working with someone who is supposedly a professional, they should never make you feel like, oh, I'm sort of getting hit on right now, or I'm getting more sexual romantic vibes, or I feel unsafe, I feel uncomfortable. No like sexual comments, no hitting on you, no like touching you, like intimate areas, you know, looking at you in a creepy way too. That if a photographer is really serious about their work, and you know, unwilling to put themselves at risk and their reputation at risk like that, they would never do that.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Any photographer that I've worked with that has been very like professional and accommodative and just like very just safe has never done anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't remember a time that I've ever worked with a photographer that I really enjoyed working with, because I like professional relationships. I'm not one that's like, you're my friend in this moment kind of a thing. Like, especially when I'm just first getting to know them and I'm just first starting to build that connection with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've never remembered anybody, and all the people that said that, oh, you're gorgeous, you're this, you're that, then it's very uncomfortable for me.
Yes.
Now with female artists and female photographers, I think it's a little bit different. One, I personally, I've worked with, there was a woman, Cheryl Mann Photography. She does all the Joffrey's shots, and she came and shot at our company. And she was amazing. I mean, one, she knows what she's doing. Yeah. Two, like she's accredited. She's a very accomplished photographer that everybody knows about, or a very big, broad audience knows about. Yeah. And so I think with some of these freelance photographers, or these ones that don't really know or aren't really known, that's when you take to social media and you start looking them up. You start looking at their friends. You start looking at the different patterns. And it does take a little bit of digging and research, especially if you don't know that anybody else that has worked with them. Right. Then you don't really understand kind of how things are. But with social media, I think that's the one good thing about social media, is that if you use it to your advantage, you can vet people. Right. Yeah. You can see the circles that they run with, because again, for every 5 people, you probably know all these other people too. And so, so I think that's like a huge thing. And, I think we're using mainly the photography example because that's what we've worked with most, but it's also musicians. I mean, any musician that's like, hey, I want to come. And so I've worked with a lot of musicians. My brother's a musician. And obviously he's my brother, so it's not going to be weird. And I know my brother, but there's been other musicians that I've worked with as well as a company dancer and things like that. So I've gotten a little bit of experience in that. I don't know about you, but any type of person that will be like, hey, I'm releasing a song. If you want to choreograph to it, send it to me. And then maybe we can do a live thing where we actually shoot a music video for it. Right. That is okay. Yes. But when people start saying, I want your input on my music, come hang with me, come experiment with me. It's a little
yeah, weird. It's a little weird. Yeah. I think especially when a lot of things I really do think now are shifting more towards a digitalized communication, because, with COVID and the pandemic and having been in lockdown for so long, one of the only ways that people can really interact and work together on anything is through social media, reaching out, or emailing, or whatever other way, digital social media technology kind of communication. So I think that if somebody, a musician or artist, whoever, reaches out to you via social media, you really have to look at what they're saying, how they open with you, are they professional, or do they lead with something kind of, overtly you're pretty, and or I find your photos really beautiful to look at, or going through a bunch of your photos and liking them and commenting on them and then following you and then just doing all these unnecessary flowery things I feel in a way, people do that in my experience, and what I've observed is that people who do that kind of stuff are trying to draw attention to themselves, because, oh, look at me, I am this musician, I'm this artist who has really cool things going on for myself, and I'm using this as a marketing strategy. And 2, to sort of get you to like them, it's very transactional, though. It's very manipulative. It's subtle. You don't really necessarily realize it until you interact more with this person. You're like, oh, so that was their motivation. Yeah. It wasn't about me ever. It was more about them wanting for me to like them in order to give them more likes on social media and to get their name out there. So that's one. And then, to anything, again, it goes for all kinds of people, all different kinds of artists. If anybody leads with a sexual thing, no. Anything to do with your physical appearance, you're beautiful, whatever. No,
Yeah.
like that's a straight up hard no.
Yeah, it's like, I think you're gorgeous, you know, this, that, and the other thing, and you look like a really good dancer. We should collab on, you know, a music video or something like that. You know, it's like, if they ever lead with that, like, I think good dancer is like one of those relative terms where it's like, okay, I am a good dancer. I kind of know that. I hope I'm a good dancer, but if they're saying like if they are emphasizing like the first part of the dancer before the dancer, whatever that word is before the dancer, I read into it a little bit, because you want to be, it's better to be safe than sorry. I mean, I think like there are some people that are going to be like, oh, that's a little bit, you know, extreme. But I think in this kind of world, you have to be extreme, because the world is pretty extreme. I mean, it's everything is just so crazy right now. And I just think of, even in the companies, you know, like dance companies, if we can get real for a second, these dance companies are firing artistic directors, teachers, dancers, because of rape allegations, because of sexual assault allegations. And they're either losing or winning in court, but it's a big thing. And so if we can see it in these huge institutions, I think people kind of write off like, oh, these are, you know, it's a smaller scale. It's the same thing. It just has a different, you know, outward appearance.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other thing too is like, you know, I think that if a guy or, okay, I know I'm kind of only talking about male, like guy, like people, but oftentimes that's those sort of situations where I felt uncomfortable, or I felt like more like, what exactly is going on here vibes are from male, you know, artists, like people. And I feel like one thing you also have to look out for is, who are they following? Like, you don't have to go all out and like stalk them, like, like go through everything.
Just a little bit.
But just you want to go to their following section, scroll through a little bit, and sort of get to know the audience that they're interested in. And who is also following them back. Because there is a musician that I once knew who on his social media was following a lot of, including myself, a lot of young dancers, very talented, gorgeous young dancers who are young, as in like some of them were 16, some of them were 15. Some of them were like barely legal, 18, you know, or, you know, like us, we're 21. But I mean, like, and then he would comment and like on a bunch of their photos, and, you know, saying the same thing, like, oh, great pictures, and like, thank you so much, that it was incredible, thank you for sharing, like, oh, or like, you look gorgeous. It was almost like he was a robot, seriously. And I felt there's something really, really strange about this person. And so I don't know what is going on, if you know, but that already was a red flag for me, because if your main audience or the people that you're targeting are young women who, you know, don't have a lot of life experience, and especially if this person, this musician or this artist is older, on the older side, you've got to wonder, why is a 30-some-year-old man trying to build relationships with young women?
Yeah. And I think too, it's like, that's where you have to be careful of getting taken advantage of, is when you are a young, you know, and in this case, this is really more geared towards women, because I'm not saying men don't get sexually assaulted at all. It's not what I'm saying. I know a couple of guys that have been, and so I'm not negating any of that. But I think, especially as young girls, where there's a lot of predatory behavior, not necessarily people themselves are being predatory, because let's face it, there's been certain mindsets and culture things that have just been implemented into men for years where they don't know it's wrong. So, you know, it's the behavior really that we're talking about and some guys just take it too far and they don't know it's wrong. And then there are some guys that, you know, take it too far and they know it's wrong. But I think that's the danger, is when they're preying on young girls and that behavior starts coming out with young girls, and the girls are desperate to build their portfolios, and the girls are desperate to be seen. I mean, social media is a world where it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me, see me, see me, see me.
Yeah.
And that's not why everyone's on social media. But at the same time, that's when you're an artist and you're trying to make it big, which most artists are. I don't think there's a whole lot of artists that will say, oh yeah, I'm an artist and I'm trying to keep in my small little bubble. Like that's right. Not why they create art. They want it to be seen.
Yep.
So when you're constantly, that's your mindset is, I want to be seen. I want to be seen. I want to be seen. This person has a lot of followers. I want to be seen. I want to be seen. I want to be seen. Yeah. That I want to be seen mentality, and that I want to get bigger mentality on social media is really dangerous. It's a really dangerous breeding ground for you being taken advantage of, whether it's being scammed out of money, because that definitely happens, or, sexual predators, or, even, I mean, it's crazy. Like even being taken advantage of can look like an artistic director. I had this happen about, I think, a year and a half ago. I had an artistic director of a well-known company email me and say, hey, I think you're a really beautiful dancer. I would like to chat with you. And this was a woman. And I would like to chat with you about joining the company perhaps, and, maybe freelancing, come do this with us, and X, Y, and Z. So I got on a Zoom meeting with her, and because I was at home in Bakersfield and I didn't feel like driving all the way to LA for that. And so she was like, yeah, I think, and just went off on how horrible she thought I was as far as technique, how I wasn't enough, how I wasn't good enough, basically. And it was like, you'll never make it big and all these different things, but I can help you get big. I can help you get better. I can give you what you're missing. And I left that Zoom meeting in shock, because I'd never had that happen before. And I wasn't expecting her, I know ballet mistresses and artistic directors, they're their own kind of animal. You never know what you're going to get. So you could get like a really stuck up, horrible person, or you could get a really nice person, or you could get what we like to call a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I've worked with a lot of those types of people. So I was like, okay, this lady's nice enough. And she was offering me like free classes. She was offering me, you won't be in the company yet, but if you come work with me, I'll build you up so that we can get you in the company and do this, 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 and this. It was wild. And I was like, this is crazy. So I told my parents about it, because I had told them, I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And they asked me, they're like, what happened with that? And so I told them, and my dad is, walks in various different types of communities. And so he knows a lot of people in the Hollywood industry, in the LA dance, showbiz industry. And so he was chatting with one of his friends that's well known in the industry. And she was like, yeah, they do that. She was like, they will beat you down and put you down all the way so that they can build you back up to what they want you to be, and then claim credit for you. And that is another example. I think that's a very different example of what we've been talking about, but that's another example of what can happen as far as being taken advantage of, because it's not that you're not enough. She saw what's in me and wanted to unlock more of it, but she wanted to take all the credit for it. So she wanted to make me think that I didn't have it, so that when she did unlock it, I would become a star that she created, which is big in show business as well.
It is. And it reminds me of all the scandals that, there was one recent one with the husband-wife. Do you remember the name of, she used to be with Boston Ballet.
Dusty Button and her. Okay. Yes, the buttons.
Yes, the buttons, that scandal that came out, it was, I think maybe several months ago, maybe at least like 3 or 4 months ago. But it reminds me of that, of how they used, they withheld job roles in productions, casting things from these young women who are gorgeous, talented dancers, but who had no choice but to submit to their authority. And were subjected to really horrible sexual things that they had to do, and were raped, were abused, were almost kidnapped and kept away from their families. And all that was done, and they had no choice because they're like, oh, my job is on the line. I'm not going to get cast in this big role if I don't do what they say. And all these manipulation tactics and this, it's horrible. And, you know, it just reminds me of your story of that, of people, artistic directors kind of taking their power to another level in a very inappropriate way.
Crazy and levels.
Just being like, hey, you know what? Like, you don't have it, but if you listen to me and if you do what I say, you will have it, and then it'll be big. And like, I promise you like this, I promise you that. And like, really like grooming you, I think, to be like, oh, if I listen to this, like, God, like my artistic director is like God or something, you know, like I'm going to be the next big star.
That's a huge thing, because I think that's the key. I've talked a lot about this with different teachers that I'm close with. And one of the biggest things that we always talk about is idolizing these people. And that's why they have power over us. And it's crazy. I mean, I was really shocked when I found out about that, because I know people that have trained her, and I know people that have worked with them, and people that have said nothing but good things about it. But I think too, it's, you know, there's a lot of things just coming out because there's more freedom now to really share it. I don't think there was really a freedom to share a lot about the experiences people have gone through in dance companies, especially. And even, I mean, it's come out on all fronts of arts and entertainment as well, but just these big things. And I'm glad it's coming out. It's really heartbreaking, because these people are not, they're banking on the fact that these people are essentially worshiping them and idolizing them. Right. And so I think the biggest piece of advice that I could probably give somebody is don't idolize your artistic directors. Right. Don't idolize your teachers. Don't idolize these professional dancers, because as soon as you let them do that, you actually allow them to have power over you. Yes. And I think it's a huge balance that you have to maintain of, I'm going to listen and submit to what you have to say, because I do believe you have my best interests at heart. But there's that other line of, I'm not going to let you walk all over me. And this is something I've experienced a lot with studios and dance companies and things like that, where the artistic director was super nice to me in the beginning, but as soon as I didn't do what they wanted me to do, they were evil. Just treated me horribly and all of that. And it's soul crushing, but you have to remember, you have 2 legs. Walk your butt out of that room.
Exactly.
Walk your butt out of there.
Get yourself out. Yeah.
I think. What would you say as far as like making these types of connections, even with, you know, because the arts and entertainment scene, I think, is bigger than social media, but even in where the connection point starts is social media. But just in general, what would you say is like a really big piece of advice, or something that potentially you've learned in kind of setting boundaries, those healthy boundaries and things like that? Because I know you dance with Alonzo King's ballet and all that stuff, and it seemed like a great experience for you.
So one thing that I will say that has helped me sort of steer clear or filter out those potentially dangerous or more manipulative situations where, you know, I'm taken advantage of, is getting recommendations on someone to connect with, or a company to check out, or a friend of a friend, you know, etc., from somebody that I trust and I know. Like, it could be like a private teacher of mine who I've known for years, who recommends somebody to me, or a company to look at, or a close friend, another dancer, you know, someone who really understands the art world, who can sort of not mentor you necessarily, but help you pave the way to find a company or a person or a collaboration that works for you, and will serve your interests. Somebody like a friend that you trust, like you could ask them, like, hey, do you know of anybody or any companies that I should be looking at that would fit me, or that you've heard good things about, or that you have worked with yourself. So like, just basically mutual friends and like people who run in your circles, or someone that you trust to give you a recommendation. That's one. I think another too is, you know, sort of checking out, like sort of understanding and trying to check out the company, like really doing your research on the company by going to their open classes if they have any, or like their intensive. And their workshops. You want to say something?
Talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's a huge thing that I wish I would have known. Like I don't feel like my teachers when I was growing up, I had one teacher that really was very helpful to me in this. And then I had another teacher that I was very close with, but didn't really know how to navigate those kind of waters because she had never been through it. So the other teachers that I knew had access to these types of information. I wish they had given it to me, but for whatever reason, I missed out on it. Or, you know, I don't know if there was something I could have done to be like, hey, can you help me out? But what are some ways that you can actually do your research on these types of things, on these types of companies and things like that?
Yeah. So I'll give an example. So for before I joined the Alonzo King Lions Ballet training program, I had a few friends who were already either dancing in their training program, like whether they had already graduated from the program or were still in it at the time, and who were probably even like who had done some of their summer intensives, who told me a little bit about their experiences. And then when I looked into it myself, I found, oh, okay, there is a winter intensive. There's like an open workshop on Zoom or in person, you know. They also have open classes at the Lions Dance Center. They have a panel going on, you know, that I could pop into, a free panel, anything, and then signing up for their newsletter as well, which I find is sometimes actually better than following them on social media. Not only because like when you go on social media, like you can spend hours on social media and get wrapped into the whole social media thing. But if you're checking your email, I just think it's good sometimes to separate the email, like the social media world from
email marketing.
Exactly.
I agree.
So I started going to their open classes. I started attending their workshops, and really like in terms of like if somebody were to ask me, but how did you have access to those resources and how did you find out about those things? Honestly, just checking out their website and like keeping up to date and like, you know, signing up for their mailing list, their email list. So I get the newsletters, and checking their website regularly, word of mouth, you know, asking a friend of mine, hey, do you know of anything going on? And again, it goes back to that trust and like seeking out people that you know, who you trust and are like, you know, able to help you sort of find something that will fit your interests because they know you. But yeah, those kinds of ways have helped me to gain more of a better understanding and do further research on the company or the studio or whatever, the person that I work with, and going to their shows. That is another big one. I mean, if you have the means, because I know that especially with bigger companies, more established, famous companies, it can be pretty damn expensive to get a ticket to their shows. So like if you have the means, of course, though now with like COVID and the pandemic, they also offer like lots of companies
offer discounts.
Free
all
live streams, you know, like YouTube archives, you know, just even if it's an excerpt, a small clip, you can search it up on Google, go to YouTube. So all those things, you know, going to their shows and like, you know, intensives, workshops, you know, really just exposing yourself as much as possible to the company before you make a commitment or a choice. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to join them, you know?
I think that's really, really good and I think that's great advice because one, it allows you to pace yourself in a way that you don't have to necessarily dive in head first and experience all these horrible things right away. You can kind of understand. And it's like being in a relationship, right? It's like, I'm going to date you for a while to see if some of the things that I don't like about you, I can live with. It's like a long-term thing.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing. And I think that's great advice. I would also like to add, looking up articles and reviews. I never knew that reviews were a thing until I was in a ballet company. And those are what kind of got me in trouble because I was good and people didn't like that. And so looking at certain reviews and finding reviews on this ballet, this state, this type of thing, because you never know what's going to go on because there are things like, I mean, we had the review come and do our ballet when I was in the company, because we had a fire at our show, and the whole, the building, it was good. It was crazy. And so there was a lot of press around that. And, it was not necessarily intentional, but looking up kind of press articles and reviews on the ballets and different things like that also allows you to get a good idea of what other people's perceptions who don't really understand dance are of what's being shown, what's being done, things like that, which I think are really helpful. That was something I didn't really know to look for until recently, when they, because I'm in school for dance education, they make us read a lot of reviews about different ballets and things like that for dance analysis purposes.
Right.
And it's actually really helpful, because I was like, if I would have known that this was something to kind of do your research on as far as ballets, I would know which companies I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with working with.
Right.
Like there's one particular company in California, I think it's American Contemporary Ballet.
Yeah.
I really love their work. Their work is very creative, very immersive. It's a whole experience. It takes the performance level of an experience going to a show very different. It's really awesome. But I also know that they like their nudity. I know they like their nude dances and those different types of things. And I know some of the company dancers there. I think they're gorgeous. They're wonderful people. And no company is ever going to be perfect. So you're obviously going to disagree on certain things, but I would never be able to fit in that company. To be honest, I'm not skinny enough. You thought I was skinny. I'm not skinny enough for that company, but that's okay, because I wouldn't want to dance for them anyways. And so
that's a whole other issue that, oh my God.
Yeah, we could go on and on about that one.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. So actually, when you brought up, some of the dancers at American Contemporary Ballet, that also reminded me of something that I think would be good in helping you find a company or to avoid situations that are dangerous or unsafe or make you lesser of a person. Is if you know some of the dancers, even if it's just one dancer there, to reach out and say, hey, can you tell me a little bit about your experience being in the company? What are your thoughts? Do you, what's a typical day for you? And sort of, asking for their experience and their thoughts on what it's been like. And even if you're not friends with, you don't have to be like best friends or BFFs with the company, one of the dancers in the company. But even if you don't know them, you could, approach one of them, like someone that you feel you have good, get good vibes from, and just say, hey, I am a dancer who's interested in potentially joining this company. I'm wondering if I could ask you a little bit about your experience, and because I want to gain a better understanding. And, I'm sure that, most, if not all, most people are nice. People want to help you, especially if you're another dancer, another artist that is so passionate about the dance world, they want to help you.
Yeah.
So don't feel afraid to reach out to someone and ask.
Yeah. And they may not, and that's fine too. But I think I call it dressing room talk. Even if you go and take class or a company class is really telling, actually, because if you're all in the same area, auditions, not as much, because everybody's very professional. They want to put their best foot forward. You're not going to get to know very much about a company through an audition process. Yeah. But if you go and take company class or a workshop that company classes are doing, or just take class in general at a company, that is one of the most telling things, because I call it dressing room talk. And even at ballet studios, you want to know what a studio is really like. You'll get to know, some of the dancers' experiences just by listening what goes on in the dressing room. It's crazy. Yes. Yeah, so definitely. I think that's a way to kind of just keep your eyes and ears open. That's really a big thing. And I think as far as partnerships outside of company work and freelances, do your research with who they've worked with. Because for instance, in the LA dance scene, we've all worked with very similar groups of people, because we know which ones are safe and which ones are not. So even following, there's an account that I think is amazing. It's led by Michelle Rose, and she has Ballerinas of Los Angeles. It is a great little hub, because I can just shoot her a message, or I can shoot her or shoot a, a little message in the comments and be like, hey, has so-and-so heard of so-and-so? Have you worked with so-and-so? And that sort of a thing. And then people will engage in the comments, or she'll engage, or she'll put, something out on the story and be like, hey, who's engaged with these types of people? She hosts a lot of different networking things. And so it's really good for that, because you can see who's weird, who's not, who's questionable, who isn't. And I think those types of things. But I think, honestly, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think the biggest key for all of it, in a sense, to wrap it all up, is really making sure that, it's not necessarily that you have to go on a new adventure by yourself. You can actually talk to other people that have been in that same experience, or been in those places, or worked with these people, asking them for that. And I think that's really, really good advice.
Yeah. Yes. Basically the main point is that you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah.
You may think like, oh, I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to like ask, because people might be like, why is she asking me this? Or like, I have my own life. Why would I help you? But truth is, I think that us humans are designed by nature to socialize and to connect with one another.
100%.
And and people are more willing to open up and be kind and to help you than you think. So again, yes, not being afraid to ask for help, reaching out.
And don't try and do it by yourself, and don't try and do it on your own, because there are a lot of people that have paved the way to create new culture in dance, especially right now, like to veer away from the the list of topics of things that we could probably talk about for hours, but the eating disorder culture, the aesthetic culture, the body culture, the sexualizing of different things culture. I mean, the whole relationship culture in dance between artistic directors and dancers, and dancers and dancers, and all these different types of things. There's a huge list, but it's like that there are people that are purposefully trying to start conversations like these to really help you not have to go through the same traumatic experiences that we've all had to go through. Exactly. So don't do it your way.
Exactly. Like like in sharing these things and in talking about this with you today, for sure. Like, these traumatic things that, we have gone through, I certainly do not wish it on anyone else.
Trauma is not a badge of honor. I think a lot of people think that it is, because we've been so conditioned to believe that, but it's not. It's it's, you do gain wisdom from those experiences, but you can also gain wisdom by not having to go through those experiences and really build off of a really solid, good foundation.
Exactly.
Well, I so enjoyed this talk. We're definitely going to have to come back together again, because I think it's so good, especially because we have such an amazing dynamic together to talk about these hard topics. And I would love to have you back, but where can people follow you? And
I am on Instagram. So my handle is at Adele. So it's spelled ADELE _ Chi, CHI 1225. So again, that's at Adele _ Chi 1225 on Instagram.
And I'll put that in the description box down below too. But thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. I think it was so good. And I'm just really glad we got to have this conversation.
And thank you for inviting me for hosting this and for getting this conversation going. I think, we both, I learned so much from you, and I just hope
from
that
you too.
By sharing this, we can all help each other and look out for one another in this world.
Absolutely.